Dakota Taylor clutched her wine glass tightly, fighting the urge to check her watch again, as her date droned on about his cryptocurrency investments for the 15th time that evening. The upscale Manhattan restaurant buzzed with ambient conversation and soft jazz, but all she could focus on was the mind-numbing monologue coming from across the table. So anyway, that's when I decided to liquidate my Ethereum position and go all in on this new coin. It's going to be huge, just wait. My buddy's cousin knows the developer and— That's fascinating, Mark, she interrupted, not even trying to mask her disinterest anymore. This blind date, courtesy of her well-meaning but clearly clueless coworker, had been a disaster from the moment Mark had shown up 20 minutes late, only to immediately start talking about himself. Dakota took another sip of her wine, already plotting her escape strategy. Maybe she could fake a work emergency. Her job as a marine biologist at the city aquarium occasionally required off-hours attention when their rescue animals needed care. It wouldn't be a complete lie. I should probably mention, Mark continued, not registering her obvious discomfort, I took the liberty of ordering for both of us. The Wagyu steak here is incredible, and I know what women like. Dakota's eyebrows shot up. You ordered for me without asking. I'm actually vegetarian. Mark waved his hand dismissively. You'll make an exception. This steak costs more than most people's daily wage. Before Dakota could respond, a commotion at the entrance of the restaurant caught her attention. Several diners turned to look as a tall man with dark hair entered, flanked by what appeared to be an assistant. Even from across the room, there was something commanding about his presence. That's Ryan Westbrook, Mark said, following her gaze. The shipping magnate. Word is his company just acquired 3 more ports along the eastern seaboard. Guys worth billions. Dakota had heard the name before it was hard not to in New York, but had never seen him in person. She didn't follow business news closely, preferring to spend her free time researching marine conservation efforts. Anyway, Mark continued, redirecting the conversation to himself, like I was saying about this investment opportunity, the waiter appeared, placing 2 plates of bloody steak in front of them. Dakota's heart sank. I really can't eat this, she said firmly. I haven't had meat in over 10 years. Mark rolled his eyes. Just try it. Do you know how much this costs? Cost isn't the issue. I have ethical reasons for not eating meat. Well, it's already here, so is everything all right with your meal? Dakota looked up to find the maitre d' standing beside their table, his expression concerned. Behind him stood Ryan Westbrook, who seemed to be waiting for his own table but had paused at the sound of their disagreement. Actually, no, Dakota said before Mark could answer. My date ordered for me without asking, and I'm vegetarian. The maitre d' looked mortified. I'm so sorry, miss. I'll have the kitchen prepare something suitable for you immediately. That won't be necessary, Mark cut in. She'll eat what I ordered. I'm paying after all. Dakota felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment and anger. She was about to gather her things and leave when Ryan Westbrook unexpectedly spoke up. Excuse me, he said, his voice deep and measured. I couldn't help but overhear. Perhaps I can help resolve this situation. Mark's eyes widened with recognition. Mr. Westbrook, I'm a huge admirer of your work. I actually have some investment ideas I'd love to discuss with you. Ryan ignored him, focusing instead on Dakota. I believe we have a mutual friend. Aren't you Dakota Taylor, Chloe's friend from college? Dakota stared at him in confusion. She didn't know anyone named Chloe who might move in the same circles as a billionaire, but something in his eyes, a subtle, purposeful intensity, made her realize he was offering her an out. Yes, she said slowly, playing along. How is Chloe these days? She's been trying to reach you about an urgent matter with one of your patients. Something about a rescued dolphin, Ryan said smoothly. She asked me to let you know if I ran into you. Mark frowned. You can call her later. We're in the middle of dinner. Dakota seized the opportunity. I'm sorry, but if it's about Neptune, I should really go now. That's one of our most vulnerable rescues. I'd be happy to drive you to the aquarium, Ryan offered. My car is outside. That's really not necessary, Mark protested, finally sensing that his date was slipping away. Dakota stood up, gathering her purse. I'm sorry, Mark. Duty calls. Thank you for understanding. She turned to Ryan. That would be very kind of you, thank you. As they walked toward the exit, Dakota could feel Mark's eyes burning into her back, but she didn't care. All she felt was relief. Once outside, Dakota turned to her unexpected savior. Thank you for that. There is no Chloe or urgent dolphin situation, is there? Ryan's serious expression broke into a warm smile that transformed his face. No, there isn't. I apologize for the deception, but you looked like you needed rescuing. Was it that obvious? Only to someone who's been trapped in their fair share of uncomfortable situations. He extended his hand. Ryan Westbrook, Dakota Taylor, and yes, I know who you are. My date made sure to point that out. She shook his hand, noting his firm but not overpowering grip. Well, Dakota Taylor, can I offer you a ride home? Or somewhere else you'd prefer to go? No strings attached, just making sure you get safely away from here. Dakota hesitated. Getting into a car with a stranger, even a famous one, wasn't something she normally did. But there was something about Ryan that put her at ease, a genuineness behind his offer that seemed rare in this city of constant hustlers. Actually, I am hungry. The place I had in mind before tonight was this little vegetarian bistro in the village, if you're not busy. The words surprised even her. Was she really asking a billionaire to join her for dinner at a modest neighborhood restaurant? Ryan smiled again, and this time it reached his eyes, creating small crinkles at the corners. I'd like that. I have a reservation here, but honestly, I've had enough stuffy business dinners this week to last a lifetime. He gestured toward a sleek black car parked nearby where a driver stood waiting. Shall we? Dakota nodded, suddenly aware that her disastrous date had taken an unexpected turn that felt bizarrely like the beginning of something new. As they settled into the luxurious back seat of his car, Dakota couldn't help but wonder if she was making a rash decision. Yet something told her that this chance encounter might be worth the risk. So you work with marine animals? Ryan asked as the car pulled away from the curb. Dakota smiled, relaxing slightly. I'm a marine biologist at the city aquarium. I specialize in rescue and rehabilitation. That sounds fascinating, Ryan said, and unlike her previous date, his interest seemed genuine. Much more meaningful than shipping and logistics. Don't sell yourself short. Without shipping, global commerce would collapse. She paused. Though I do have some thoughts about the environmental impact of shipping routes on marine ecosystems. Ryan leaned forward, a spark of interest in his eyes. I'd like to hear them. And just like that, they fell into a conversation that flowed naturally as the car navigated through the evening traffic of Manhattan. Dakota found herself explaining her work with injured sea turtles and displaced marine mammals, while Ryan listened attentively, asking thoughtful questions. When they arrived at the small bistro tucked away on a quiet village street, Dakota half expected Ryan to look disappointed by the modest establishment. Instead, he seemed genuinely pleased as they were led to a corner table adorned with a simple candle and fresh flowers. This place has character, he said, looking around at the eclectic decor, a mix of vintage posters and local artwork. How did you find it? I live a few blocks from here. It's my go-to spot after long days at work when I don't feel like cooking, Dakota explained, settling into her chair. The owner sources everything locally and seasonally. As they studied the menus, Dakota couldn't help but observe Ryan more closely. Up close, he was even more handsome than the occasional business magazine covers suggested. Strong jawline, intelligent blue eyes, and dark hair just beginning to gray slightly at the temples. But it was the way he carried himself that was most striking: confident without being arrogant, attentive without being overbearing. "So," she said after they ordered, "do you make a habit of rescuing women from bad dates, or was I just lucky?" Ryan laughed, a rich sound that made several nearby diners glance their way. "First time, actually. I was waiting for my table when I overheard him ordering for you. It reminded me of my sister and how much she hates when men do that." "Your sister sounds smart." "She is." "She would like you," Ryan said, then looked slightly embarrassed as though he'd gotten ahead of himself. "I mean, she's also passionate about environmental issues. She runs our foundation's conservation programs." "Westbrook Foundation, right?" "I think I've read about your work restoring coastal wetlands." Ryan nodded, looking pleased that she knew about it. "That's one of our initiatives. My father started the shipping company, but he never considered the environmental impact. When I took over after his death, incorporating sustainability became my priority." Their appetizers arrived, a colorful platter of locally grown vegetables with house-made dips. As they shared the food, Dakota found herself becoming increasingly comfortable in Ryan's presence. There was none of the pretense she'd expected from someone in his position. "Can I ask you something?" she said after they'd been talking for a while. "Of course. Why did you really stop to help me tonight? You must see people in uncomfortable situations all the time." Ryan considered her question, taking a sip of his sparkling water. "Honestly, something about the look on your face. You seemed too kind to tell that guy off, but too smart to suffer through another minute with him." He paused. "And maybe I was looking for an excuse to escape my own evening plans." Negotiating shipping contracts over dinner isn't exactly thrilling. Dakota appreciated his candor. "Well, whatever your reasons, thank you. This is turning out to be a much better evening than I anticipated." As their main courses arrived, a seasonal vegetable risotto for Dakota and a mushroom Wellington for Ryan, their conversation deepened. They discovered mutual passions for hiking, classic films, and, surprisingly, vintage pinball machines. "There's an arcade museum in Asbury Park that has some incredible machines from the 70s, Dakota mentioned. "I go down there sometimes on weekends." "I haven't played pinball in years," Ryan admitted, "but I used to love it. My grandfather had a machine in his basement." "You should come sometime," Dakota said, then immediately felt self-conscious. "I mean, if you're interested in that sort of thing." "I'd like that," Ryan replied, his eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. As the evening progressed, Dakota found herself wondering if this unexpected connection was simply a pleasant diversion for both of them or something more. Ryan was attentive and engaging, but surely someone like him had women pursuing him constantly. The thought made her pull back slightly. "Everything okay?" Ryan asked, noticing the shift in her demeanor. "Yes, just—" Dakota hesitated. "This is nice, but I'm sure you have more important things to do than rescue random women and eat vegetarian food." Ryan set down his fork and regarded her seriously. "Dakota, I'm exactly where I want to be right now. In fact, this is the most enjoyable evening I've had in months." Something in his tone convinced her he was being sincere, and she felt herself relaxing again. By the time they finished their dessert, a shared plate of seasonal berry crumble, Dakota realized they'd been talking for nearly 3 hours. When the check came, Ryan reached for it automatically. "Let me get this," Dakota said. You saved me from a terrible date. The least I can do is buy you dinner. Ryan looked surprised. I'm perfectly capable, I know you are, Dakota interrupted with a smile. But so am I. And I invited you here, remember? After a moment, Ryan nodded, a look of respect crossing his face. Thank you. Outside the restaurant, the spring night had turned cooler and Dakota wrapped her light jacket more tightly around herself. Ryan's driver was already waiting at the curb. Can I give you a ride home? Ryan asked. I'm just a few blocks away. The walk is nice. Then I'll walk with you, he said decisively. He spoke briefly to his driver, who nodded and drove away. As they strolled through the quiet village streets, Dakota was struck by how natural it felt to be walking beside this man she'd known for only a few hours. The usual defenses she maintained with new people had somehow been bypassed. This is me, she said eventually, stopping before a pre-war brownstone. It's nothing fancy, but the rent is stabilized and I have access to the rooftop garden. Ryan looked up at the building with genuine interest. It's beautiful. These old buildings have so much character. An awkward silence fell between them, the kind that occurs when neither person wants an evening to end but isn't sure how to extend it. Dakota, Ryan finally said, I've really enjoyed tonight. Would it be too forward to ask for your number? I'd like to see you again. Dakota hesitated only briefly. I'd like that too. As they exchanged phones to input their contact information, their fingers brushed, sending an unexpected jolt through Dakota's hand. When she looked up, Ryan's eyes suggested he'd felt it too. I should probably mention, he said as he handed back her phone, I'm leaving for Singapore tomorrow for a week. Business meetings I can't reschedule. Of course, Dakota nodded, trying not to feel disappointed. You're a busy man. But I'd like to call you if that's okay. And when I get back, perhaps we could have dinner again, or visit that pinball arcade you mentioned. Dakota smiled. I'd like that. Ryan stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. For a moment, Dakota thought he might kiss her, and she was surprised to realize how much she wanted him to. Instead, he gently took her hand and squeezed it. Good night, Dakota Taylor. Thank you for turning what would have been a forgettable business dinner into a memorable evening. Good night, Ryan, and thank you again for the rescue. As she watched him walk away, Dakota felt a mixture of emotions she couldn't quite sort through. Excitement, certainly, but also caution. Men like Ryan Westbrook didn't typically enter her world, and she wasn't naive enough to think one pleasant evening meant anything significant. Still, as she climbed the stairs to her apartment, she couldn't help but hope he would call as promised. There had been something in his eyes when he said goodbye, something that suggested he was as intrigued by their unexpected connection as she was. Dakota woke the next morning to a text message from an unknown number. Boarding for Singapore now. Just wanted to say again how much I enjoyed meeting you. Would it be okay if I called when I land? Ryan, she smiled, typing a quick response, safe travels. And yes, I'd like that. Setting her phone aside, Dakota tried to temper her expectations. One evening, and a few text messages weren't grounds for getting carried away. Yet she couldn't deny the flutter of anticipation she felt whenever she thought about seeing him again. Over the next few days, Dakota threw herself into her work at the aquarium, supervising the care of a newly rescued sea lion pup and preparing for an upcoming educational program for local schools. But despite her busy schedule, her thoughts frequently drifted to Ryan. True to his word, he called when he landed in Singapore, despite the 12-hour time difference, meaning it was 3 a.m. in New York. Dakota, who had fallen asleep on her couch watching a documentary, was groggy when she answered. I'm so sorry, Ryan said when he realized he'd woken her. I should have calculated the time better. "It's fine," Dakota assured him, pulling herself upright. "I wasn't in bed yet anyway. How was your flight?" "Long but productive. I caught up on some reading about marine conservation, actually." Dakota smiled into the darkness of her apartment. "Research for our next conversation." "Something like that," he admitted. "I was particularly interested in the impact of commercial shipping on whale migration patterns. There are technologies we could implement fleet-wide to reduce our footprint." They talked for nearly an hour, with Ryan describing the view from his hotel and Dakota sharing stories about the sea lion pup's progress. By the time they hung up, Dakota was fully awake and undeniably smitten with the way Ryan seemed genuinely interested in her work and thoughts. Their long-distance conversations continued throughout the week. Despite his packed schedule of meetings and negotiations, Ryan made time to call Dakota daily, sometimes just for a few minutes between appointments. They talked about everything: their childhoods, favorite books, professional challenges, and future aspirations. Dakota learned that despite his wealth, Ryan lived relatively modestly, preferring to direct most of his fortune toward environmental and educational initiatives. "My father was obsessed with appearances," he told her during one late-night call. "Multiple homes, yachts, private jets. When he died and I saw how little joy all those possessions had actually brought him, I decided to live differently." "That couldn't have been easy, breaking from family tradition like that," Dakota observed. "It wasn't. Some of our board members still think I'm crazy for investing so heavily in sustainable technologies when they cut into our short-term profits. But I'm playing the long game." With each conversation, Dakota felt herself becoming more invested in knowing him better, while simultaneously questioning whether someone so established in his life and career could possibly be as interested in her as he seemed. The night before Ryan was due to return to New York, Dakota's doubts surfaced during their call. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a lull in their conversation. "Anything." "Why me? You could probably date models or socialites or, I don't know, someone more aligned with your world." There was a pause before Ryan answered, his voice thoughtful. "Do you know what I saw when I looked at you that night in the restaurant, before I even heard what was happening with your date?" "What?" "Someone completely comfortable in her own skin. Someone who wasn't trying to impress anyone. Do you know how rare that is in my world? Everyone wants something from me, Dakota, but you were just being yourself. And when I offered you a ride, you asked me to go to a tiny vegetarian restaurant instead of suggesting some exclusive club or expensive venue." He chuckled softly. "You even insisted on paying." Dakota smiled, remembering. "Well, it seemed like the right thing to do. It was refreshing. You're refreshing, and talking to you this past week has been the highlight of each day." His words eased her doubts, at least temporarily. They made plans to meet the day after his return, and when they finally hung up, Dakota found herself counting the hours until she would see him again. Ryan's flight was scheduled to land at JFK at 4:30 p.m. the next day. He'd insisted on picking Dakota up at the aquarium after her shift ended at 6, despite her protests that he would be exhausted from his trip. "I've been looking forward to seeing you all week," he'd texted that morning before boarding his flight. "A little jet lag isn't going to stop me." As closing time approached, Dakota found herself unusually self-conscious about her appearance. She had changed from her usual work clothes khakis and a polo shirt with the aquarium logo into a simple blue dress she'd stashed in her locker that morning. Her colleague Marina had noticed the transformation with raised eyebrows. "Hot date," she'd teased. "Just dinner with a friend," Dakota had replied, trying to sound casual. But as she applied a touch of lip gloss in the bathroom mirror, Dakota knew this was more than just dinner with a friend. The anticipation she felt was unlike anything she'd experienced with previous relationships. At precisely 6:05, her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan. "I'm outside whenever you're ready. No rush." Dakota took a deep breath, grabbed her bag, and headed for the exit. As she pushed through the doors into the early evening sunshine, she spotted Ryan leaning against a sleek silver convertible, looking impossibly handsome in dark jeans and a light blue button-down shirt with the sleeves rolled up. When he saw her, his face broke into a wide smile that made Dakota's heart skip. He straightened and walked toward her, stopping just close enough that she could smell his subtle cologne. "Hi," he said simply. "Hi yourself," Dakota replied, suddenly shy despite their hours of phone conversations. "Nice car." "Thanks. I thought since it's such a beautiful evening we could drive up the coast a bit. There's a place I know with great food and an even better view, if you're interested." "That sounds perfect." As Ryan opened the passenger door for her, their eyes met briefly, and Dakota felt that same electric connection they'd shared on the night they met. Once they were both settled in the car, Ryan turned to her before starting the engine. "I missed you," he said quietly. "Is that strange to say after knowing you for such a short time?" Dakota shook her head. "Not if it's true, because I missed you too." Ryan's smile widened, and he reached over to squeeze her hand before starting the car. As they pulled away from the aquarium, Dakota felt a sense of anticipation and possibility that made her previous doubts seem distant. The drive up the coast was beautiful, with the setting sun casting golden light across the water. They drove with the top down, the warm spring air whipping around them, making conversation difficult but creating a companionable silence punctuated by shared glances and smiles. After about 45 minutes, Ryan turned onto a narrow road that wound upward along a cliffside. At the top sat a rustic-looking restaurant with a wide deck overlooking the ocean. "This is one of my favorite places," Ryan explained as they parked. "I discovered it by accident a few years ago when I was driving aimlessly after a particularly difficult board meeting." Inside, the restaurant was warm and inviting, with wooden beams overhead and large windows maximizing the spectacular view. The hostess greeted Ryan by name and led them to a corner table on the deck. "I take it you come here often?" Dakota asked after they were seated. "When I need space to think. The owner, Antonio, doesn't make a fuss about who I am. He just serves good food and leaves me in peace." Ryan glanced around appreciatively. "I've never actually brought anyone here before." The significance of his words wasn't lost on Dakota. "Thank you for sharing it with me then." As they studied their menus, Dakota noticed Ryan stifling a yawn. "You must be exhausted," she said sympathetically. "We could have done this another night." Ryan shook his head firmly. "I've been thinking about seeing you again since the moment I left for Singapore. A little tiredness isn't going to get in the way of that." His direct gaze made Dakota blush slightly. Their dinner was even more enjoyable than their first, with the added comfort of already knowing each other better through their week of conversations. Ryan shared stories from his trip, including a mishap with a translator that had nearly derailed an important negotiation, while Dakota told him about the sea lion pup's progress and her upcoming presentation to the aquarium's board about expanding their rescue facilities. "You know," Ryan said thoughtfully after their entrees had been cleared, "the Westbrook Foundation might be interested in supporting that kind of expansion. We're always looking for impactful environmental initiatives to fund." Dakota frowned slightly. "I appreciate that, but I wouldn't want there to be any confusion about this," she gestured between them. "My work is separate from whatever is happening between us." Ryan nodded, looking both surprised and impressed by her response. You're right, and I respect that completely. I didn't mean to overstep. You didn't, Dakota assured him. It's just important to me to maintain those boundaries. Understood. Ryan reached across the table to take her hand. For what it's worth, I admire your integrity. It's another thing I like about you. The intensity in his eyes made Dakota's breath catch. What else do you like about me? She asked softly, surprised by her own boldness. Ryan's thumb traced circles on the back of her hand as he answered. Your passion for your work. The way you light up when you talk about the animals in your care, your independence, your smile. His voice dropped lower. The way you look in that blue dress. Dakota felt heat rise to her cheeks. Careful, Mr. Westbrook. You're starting to sound like a man with intentions. Maybe I am, he replied, holding her gaze steadily. The moment was interrupted by their waiter arriving with dessert, a shared tiramisu that neither had actually ordered. Compliments of Antonio, the waiter explained. He says it's good to see you with a smile on your face for once, Mr. Westbrook. Ryan laughed, looking slightly embarrassed. Please thank him for me. As they shared the delicious dessert, their conversation turned to more personal territories, past relationships, family dynamics, hopes for the future. Dakota learned that Ryan had been briefly engaged several years ago to a woman who, in his words, was more interested in what my name could do for her than who I actually was. That experience made me cautious, he admitted. It's why I value authenticity so highly now. I can understand that, Dakota said. It must be difficult to know who to trust when you have so much. It is, but some people make it easy. His eyes met hers meaningfully. You, for instance, you've never once asked me about my wealth or tried to leverage our connection. Do you know how unusual that is? Dakota shrugged. I'm interested in you, not your bank account, though I won't pretend I'm not impressed by what you've done with your company and foundation. As the evening drew to a close, neither seemed eager for it to end. They lingered over coffee, watching as the last of the sunset faded into darkness and stars began to appear overhead. I should probably get you home, Ryan said eventually, though his reluctant tone suggested he wished otherwise. It's getting late, and I know you have work tomorrow. The drive back was quieter, with Dakota occasionally stealing glances at Ryan's profile, illuminated by the dashboard lights. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other resting lightly on her knee, a casual intimacy that felt both new and somehow familiar. When they pulled up in front of her brownstone, Ryan turned off the engine and turned to face her. I had a wonderful time tonight. So did I, Dakota replied softly. I'm going to be in meetings most of tomorrow, but I was wondering if you'd be free the day after. There's something I'd like to show you. I have the afternoon off, Dakota told him. What did you have in mind? It's a surprise, Ryan said with a smile. Just wear comfortable shoes. Dakota raised an eyebrow. Mysterious, I like it. Ryan walked her to her door, both of them moving slowly, prolonging these last moments together. When they reached the entrance to her building, Dakota turned to face him. Thank you for tonight. It was worth the wait. For me too, Ryan said, stepping closer. His hand came up to gently touch her cheek, his eyes asking a silent question. When Dakota leaned slightly into his touch, he closed the remaining distance between them and kissed her softly. The kiss was gentle at first, almost tentative, but when Dakota's hands moved to his shoulders, Ryan deepened it, wrapping an arm around her waist to pull her closer. The connection was immediate and intense, making Dakota's head spin with its rightness. When they finally broke apart, both were slightly breathless. Ryan rested his forehead against hers for a moment before stepping back, his eyes dark with an emotion Dakota couldn't quite name. Good night, Dakota, he said, his voice husky. Good night, Ryan. As she watched him walk back to his car, Dakota touched her lips, still feeling the imprint of his kiss. Something significant had shifted between them tonight, moving beyond mere attraction to a deeper connection that both thrilled and frightened her with its potential. Inside her apartment, Dakota kicked off her shoes and sank onto her couch, replaying every moment of the evening in her mind. Her phone buzzed with a text from Ryan, "Home safe. Already looking forward to seeing you again." She smiled and typed back, "Safe and sound, me too." Setting her phone aside, Dakota hugged a cushion to her chest, allowing herself to acknowledge what she'd been trying to downplay. She was falling for Ryan Westbrook, and falling hard. The next day dragged by as Dakota went through her routine at the aquarium, her mind frequently wandering to thoughts of Ryan and their upcoming date. She'd received another text from him that morning. "Stuck in meetings all day, but thinking of you. Still on for tomorrow. I'll pick you up at 1 p.m. She'd confirmed, her curiosity growing about what he had planned. That evening she called her sister Deanna, needing to share her excitement with someone. "Wait, Ryan Westbrook." "The shipping guy," Deanna exclaimed after Dakota filled her in. "The one who's always in those most eligible billionaire lists." "That's him," Dakota confirmed. "Though he's nothing like what you'd expect. He's thoughtful and genuinely interested in my work, and he's passionate about environmental conservation." "Sounds too good to be true," Deanna said skeptically. "Men like that usually have a catch." "Maybe," Dakota admitted. "But so far the only catch seems to be that I can't stop thinking about him." Deanna sighed. "Just be careful, okay? I don't want to see you get hurt." "I know." "I'm being cautious," Dakota assured her, though she wasn't entirely sure that was true. The speed and intensity of her feelings for Ryan were anything but cautious. When 1 p.m. arrived the next day, Dakota was waiting outside her building, dressed in jeans, a light sweater, and comfortable walking shoes as instructed. Ryan pulled up in a different car, a more modest SUV, and greeted her with a kiss that made her forget her sister's warnings. "Ready for an adventure?" he asked, his eyes twinkling with excitement. "Absolutely." "Are you going to tell me where we're going now?" "Not yet. It's about an hour's drive." As they headed out of the city, their conversation flowed easily, touching on everything from current events to childhood memories. Dakota was struck again by how comfortable she felt with Ryan, as though they'd known each other for years rather than days. Eventually, they turned onto a winding road that led deep into a wooded area north of the city. After passing through a security gate, where the guard nodded respectfully to Ryan, they continued up a private drive until they reached a clearing where a beautiful but modest wooden house stood overlooking a small lake. "What is this place?" Dakota asked, taking in the stunning natural setting. "This is my home," Ryan said simply. "My real home, not the penthouse apartment that everyone assumes I live in." Dakota looked at him in surprise. "You commute from here every day?" "Most days, yes, unless I have late meetings. The penthouse is mostly for convenience and appearances." He shrugged. "The press expects a certain lifestyle, and sometimes it's easier to let them think what they want." As they got out of the car, Dakota noticed several structures beyond the main house, what looked like greenhouses, a barn, and smaller outbuildings scattered across the property. "Come on," Ryan said, taking her hand. "I want to show you something." He led her toward one of the larger outbuildings, which turned out to be a state-of-the-art research facility focused on water purification technologies. "This is what I wanted you to see," he explained as they entered. "We're developing systems that can be implemented in areas affected by industrial pollution, particularly in waterways impacted by shipping and manufacturing." For the next hour, Ryan showed Dakota around the facility, introducing her to the small team of scientists who worked there and explaining the various projects underway. His enthusiasm was contagious, and Dakota found herself deeply impressed by his commitment to environmental remediation. "This is incredible," she said as they concluded the tour. "Why keep it so secret? We're still in early stages with some of these technologies. Once they're ready for implementation, we'll make them open source. The goal isn't profit, it's impact." Ryan's words reinforced what Dakota was coming to understand about him beneath the successful businessman was someone with a genuine desire to make positive change in the world. After the research facility, Ryan showed her the rest of his property, including the organic gardens that supplied most of his food, the solar array that powered the entire compound, and finally, his home itself. The house was beautiful but unpretentious open spaces filled with natural light, comfortable furniture, and walls lined with books. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the lake, where a small dock extended into the water. "It's beautiful," Dakota said as Ryan gave her a tour. "So peaceful." "It's my sanctuary," he agreed. "Very few people know about this place." The significance of him sharing it with her wasn't lost on Dakota. "Thank you for showing me." As the afternoon progressed, they prepared dinner together using vegetables from Ryan's garden, working in companionable synchrony in his spacious kitchen. Dakota couldn't help but notice how natural it felt to be there with him, as if they'd been doing this for years. After dinner, they took mugs of tea out to the dock and sat side by side, watching the sunset reflect on the lake's surface. Ryan's arm wrapped around Dakota's shoulders, pulling her close against the cooling evening air. "Can I ask you something?" she said after a comfortable silence. "Anything." "Why did you really help me that night at the restaurant? The truth." Ryan considered her question before answering. "I saw you when you first walked in, actually. You caught my eye immediately. There was something so genuine about you. When I overheard what was happening with your date, it just seemed like the universe was giving me an opportunity I shouldn't pass up." He turned to look at her directly. "I'm not usually that impulsive, but something told me I'd regret it if I didn't at least try to meet you." Dakota smiled. "I'm glad you did. So am I." Ryan's fingers gently traced the line of her jaw, "More than I can express." When he kissed her this time, there was a new urgency that hadn't been there before. Dakota responded in kind, her hands sliding into his hair as she shifted closer to him. The connection between them felt electric and inevitable. Ryan pulled back slightly, his breathing uneven. "Dakota, I need you to know something. This isn't casual for me. What I'm feeling for you, it's significant." "I feel it too," she admitted softly. "It scares me a little, how quickly this is happening." "We can take it as slowly as you need," Ryan assured her, though the intensity in his eyes suggested patience might be a challenge. They spent the rest of the evening talking, occasionally interrupted by increasingly passionate kisses, until the sky darkened completely and stars appeared overhead. When Ryan finally drove her home, the goodbye at her door lasted nearly 20 minutes, neither wanting to part. "When can I see you again?" Ryan asked, his forehead resting against hers. "I'm free this weekend," Dakota replied. "Or tomorrow if you are." "Tomorrow, then. And the weekend?" His smile was both tender and possessive. "I'm finding it hard to let you go even for a night." "Then don't," Dakota said impulsively, surprising herself with her boldness. Ryan's eyes darkened with desire, but he shook his head slightly. "Not tonight. When that happens, and I very much want it to happen, I want it to be perfect, not rushed." His restraint only made Dakota want him more, but she appreciated the respect behind his decision. With one last lingering kiss, they said goodnight, both knowing that their relationship had crossed a threshold from which there was no turning back. Over the next few weeks, Dakota and Ryan were nearly inseparable whenever their schedules allowed. They fell into a rhythm that felt both exciting and comfortably familiar: dinners at his lake house or her apartment, long walks through the city, and increasingly frequent nights spent together, their physical relationship developing with the same intensity as their emotional connection. Dakota introduced Ryan to her sister and closest friends, all of whom were initially skeptical but quickly won over by his unassuming manner and obvious adoration of Dakota. Ryan, in turn, brought Dakota into his world, introducing her to his younger sister Rebecca, who immediately embraced Dakota with enthusiasm, and even to select business associates and friends. "You're nothing like the women he usually dates," Rebecca told Dakota during a lunch outing. "Thank goodness. What were they like?" Dakota couldn't help asking, calculated, always aware of the advantages of being with him. Rebecca rolled her eyes. "You should have seen how quickly they scattered when he started redirecting most of the company profits toward environmental initiatives instead of expansion." The more Dakota learned about Ryan's past, the more she understood his appreciation for what he called her refreshing authenticity. And the more time she spent with him, the deeper her feelings grew. One particular evening, about 2 months into their relationship, Ryan invited Dakota to join him at a charity gala supporting ocean conservation, their first official public appearance as a couple. Dakota had been nervous about the attention, but Ryan had been supportive, helping her select a stunning emerald gown that made her feel confident despite the intimidating setting. As they mingled with New York's elite at the Metropolitan Museum, Dakota was struck by how different Ryan was in this environment, still warm with her, but more guarded with others, a protective shell he seemed to have developed over years in the public eye. "Are you having an okay time?" he asked during a quiet moment, his hand resting protectively on the small of her back. "It's fascinating," Dakota admitted, "though I'm not sure I'd want to do this every weekend." Ryan laughed softly. "Neither would I. That's why I limit these appearances to causes I truly care about." As the evening progressed, Dakota noticed the curious glances and occasional whispers that followed them. Ryan Westbrook with an unknown marine biologist instead of a model or socialite was apparently noteworthy. "Don't mind them," Ryan murmured when he caught her noticing. "They're just surprised to see me with someone who can discuss more than fashion trends." Despite the attention, Dakota enjoyed seeing this aspect of Ryan's life, particularly how he used his influence to direct substantial donations toward marine conservation efforts. By the end of the evening, the gala had raised over $10 million, with Ryan's foundation providing a matching grant. As they returned to his lake house afterward, Dakota now spent more nights there than at her own apartment. Ryan seemed thoughtful. "What did you think?" "Being thrown into that world?" he asked as they sat by the fireplace. Dakota curled against him with her heels discarded and her hair released from its elegant updo. "It was illuminating," she said honestly. "I can see why you prefer this place to that scene." Ryan nodded, absently running his fingers through her hair. "It's exhausting, maintaining the public persona, but tonight was different because you were there." He paused. "Everything is different with you, Dakota." There was something in his voice that made her look up at him questioningly. Ryan met her gaze with an intensity that took her breath away. "I love you," he said simply. "I think I have since that first night at the vegetarian bistro, but I was afraid it was too soon to say it." Dakota's heart seemed to stop for a moment before racing forward. "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily because they were true. "I've been afraid to say it too." Ryan pulled her closer, kissing her with a tenderness that quickly blazed into passion. Later, As they lay tangled together in his bed, Dakota marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just 2 short months. What had begun as a rescue from an awkward date had become the most significant relationship of her life. As spring turned to summer, Dakota and Ryan settled into a relationship that balanced their individual lives with their growing connection. Ryan made space in his schedule for what mattered to Dakota, attending her presentations at the aquarium, joining her for weekend hikes, and even rolling up his sleeves to help with hands-on conservation projects she organized along the coast. Dakota, in turn, found ways to support Ryan's often demanding schedule, sometimes accompanying him on business trips where they would steal days at the beginning or end for themselves. She maintained her independence and career, but increasingly, their lives were intertwining in meaningful ways. The first significant challenge to their relationship came in late August, when a major crisis erupted at one of Ryan's shipping terminals in South America. An equipment malfunction had resulted in a small but environmentally sensitive oil spill, and Ryan immediately flew to personally oversee the cleanup and mitigation efforts. "I need to be on site," he explained apologetically as he packed. "This is exactly the kind of environmental impact I've been working to prevent. I have to make it right." "I understand," Dakota assured him. "How can I help?" Ryan looked at her gratefully. "Just knowing you support me is enough." "I'm not sure how long I'll be gone. Could be a week, could be a month, depending on how extensive the damage is. What if I came down for a while? I have vacation time I could use, and my background might actually be useful in assessing the ecological impact." Ryan's face lit up with surprise and appreciation. "You do that, of course. This matters to you, which means it matters to me. Plus, it's literally my field of expertise." 3 days later, Dakota joined Ryan in Brazil, where she found him exhausted but determined, working around the clock with environmental experts and local officials to contain the spill's damage. Her arrival visibly lifted his spirits, and her professional expertise proved invaluable in developing a comprehensive rehabilitation plan for the affected coastal ecosystem. For 2 weeks, they worked side by side, often putting in 16-hour days. Dakota saw a new side of Ryan during this crisis: his unwavering commitment to taking responsibility, his compassion for the local communities affected, and his willingness to invest whatever resources were necessary to make things right. Most CEOs would have sent a team of lawyers and PR people, one of the environmental consultants commented to Dakota. "Instead, he's here in the mud with the rest of us, and he's covering costs that go far beyond what regulations require." The crisis brought them closer, reinforcing their shared values and demonstrating how effectively they could work as a team. When they finally returned to New York, their relationship had deepened in ways neither had anticipated. "Thank you," Ryan said simply as they arrived back at the lake house, both exhausted from the long flight. "For coming down there, for your expertise, for everything." "You don't need to thank me," Dakota replied, squeezing his hand. "That's what partners do. They show up for each other." The word partners seemed to resonate with Ryan. Later that evening, after they'd both showered and changed into comfortable clothes, he asked Dakota to join him on the dock, their favorite spot for important conversations. The September evening was cool, with the first hints of autumn coloring the trees surrounding the lake. Ryan seemed unusually nervous, fidgeting slightly as they sat side by side. "What's on your mind?" Dakota asked, concerned by his uncharacteristic restlessness. Ryan took a deep breath. "These past few months with you have been the happiest of my life. Before I met you, I was focused almost entirely on work, building the company, expanding the foundation, trying to undo some of the environmental damage my father's generation caused. He turned to face her directly. But you've shown me that there's more to life than just work, no matter how meaningful that work is. You've brought balance and joy and wholeness. Dakota's heart began to race as she sensed where this conversation was heading. What I'm trying to say, Ryan continued, reaching into his pocket, is that I can't imagine my life without you in it. You're my partner in every sense of the word, and I want to make that official. He produced a small box and opened it to reveal a stunning but tasteful emerald ring surrounded by small diamonds. Dakota Taylor, will you marry me? Despite having suspected this moment was coming, Dakota found herself overwhelmed with emotion. Tears filled her eyes as she nodded. Yes, she managed to say. Yes, absolutely yes. Ryan's face broke into the most radiant smile she'd ever seen as he slipped the ring onto her finger. When he kissed her, Dakota felt as though everything in her life had been leading to this moment, this partnership with a man who valued her mind as much as her heart, who shared her passions and supported her dreams. I was so nervous, Ryan admitted when they finally broke apart. Which is ridiculous considering I negotiate multimillion-dollar deals regularly. Dakota laughed, wiping away happy tears. Those deals probably don't talk back. True. And none of them matter as much as your answer did. He held her close, both of them looking out over the lake. I want to build a life with you, Dakota. A real life, not just the public version people expect. That's exactly what I want too, she said softly. In the weeks that followed, they began planning their future together. They decided on a small, intimate wedding at the lake house the following spring, with only close family and friends in attendance. Dakota would keep her apartment in the city for nights when she worked late at the aquarium, but the lake house would be their primary home. They also discussed their professional goals, Dakota's desire to expand the aquarium's rescue program, which Ryan supported wholeheartedly, and Ryan's plans to transition more of his day-to-day business responsibilities to trusted executives so he could focus on the environmental initiatives that truly motivated him. I've been thinking, Ryan said one evening as they worked on wedding plans, about combining our professional passions more formally. What do you mean? Dakota asked. What if we established a marine conservation division within the Westbrook Foundation? You could lead it if you wanted, or we could bring in someone else and you could serve as an advisor. Either way, it would significantly expand the scope and impact of the work you're already doing. Dakota considered the idea carefully. It's appealing, but I'd want to be sure it wasn't seen as nepotism. My credibility in the scientific community is important to me. Of course. That's why I thought you might prefer the advisory role, at least initially. Your expertise would shape the programs, but without the appearance of favoritism. I like that approach, Dakota nodded. It feels like the right balance. As autumn deepened into winter, they settled into a rhythm of shared life that felt both exciting and comfortably domestic. They spent Thanksgiving with Dakota's family and Christmas with Ryan's sister, their lives becoming increasingly intertwined as they prepared to formalize their union in the spring. New Year's Eve found them back at the lake house, opting for a quiet celebration rather than the high-profile parties Ryan had typically attended in previous years. As midnight approached, they stood on the dock wrapped in blankets, watching fireworks in the distance reflect off the partially frozen lake. Any New Year's resolutions? Dakota asked, leaning back against Ryan's chest as his arms encircled her. Just one, he replied, his breath warm against her ear. To make sure you never regret saying yes to me. Dakota turned in his arms to face him. That's impossible. Saying yes to you was the easiest decision I've ever made. As the distant countdown reached 0 and fireworks illuminated the sky, they shared a kiss that held the promise of their future together, a future built on chance meeting that had evolved into the deepest connection either had ever known. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and perfect, with spring sunshine glinting off the lake and the property's gardens bursting with early blooms. In keeping with their desire for intimacy and authenticity, they had planned a simple ceremony with just 40 guests, close family and friends who truly knew and supported them. Dakota got ready in the guest house with her sister and 2 closest friends, feeling surprisingly calm as she slipped into her elegant but understated gown, an off-shoulder design in ivory silk that complemented her natural beauty without overwhelming it. "You look radiant," Deanna said, adjusting the simple floral crown that Dakota had chosen instead of a traditional veil. "I feel it," Dakota replied, glancing at her reflection. "Happy, certain." "You know," Deanna said thoughtfully, "when you first told me about Ryan, I was worried. The whole billionaire rescues girl scenario seemed too much like a fairy tale to be real." Dakota smiled. "I know. I had the same doubts initially. But seeing you two together these past months, it's obvious this is the real thing. He looks at you like you're his whole world." "That goes both ways," Dakota said softly. A knock at the door announced the arrival of Dakota's father, who would walk her down the aisle. His eyes misted over when he saw her. "You look beautiful, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Are you ready?" Dakota nodded, taking a deep breath. More than ready. The ceremony was held on the dock, which had been transformed with simple white flowers and gauzy fabric that billowed gently in the spring breeze. Guests were seated in white chairs facing the lake, and a string quartet played softly as Dakota's father escorted her down a petal-strewn path. At the end of the dock stood Ryan, looking handsome and slightly awestruck in a light gray suit. When their eyes met, everything else seemed to fade away: the guests, the music, even the spectacular setting, leaving only the two of them and the profound connection they shared. Their vows were personal and heartfelt. Ryan spoke of how Dakota had transformed his life from one of purpose, but solitude, to one filled with joy and partnership. Dakota, in turn, thanked Ryan for seeing her true self from their very first meeting and for loving her exactly as she was. "I promise to stand by you in all endeavors, to support your dreams as you've supported mine, and to face whatever challenges arise as your equal partner," she concluded. "I love you, Ryan, not for what you possess, but for who you are, the most genuine, compassionate, and remarkable man I've ever known." As they exchanged rings and were pronounced husband and wife, cheers erupted from their gathered loved ones. The celebration that followed was joyful and relaxed, with dinner served in the garden under strings of twinkling lights, and dancing continuing well into the evening. Throughout the night, Dakota caught glimpses of Ryan watching her with an expression of such profound happiness that it took her breath away. Each time their eyes met across the room, she felt the same surge of certainty that, despite the improbable beginning of their relationship, they had found in each other something authentic and lasting. "Happy?" Ryan asked as they shared a quiet moment away from the festivities, standing at the edge of the property overlooking the moonlit lake. "Completely," Dakota replied, leaning into his embrace. "It's perfect. Simple and meaningful, exactly what I wanted. Me too." Ryan kissed her temple. "Though there is one surprise I've been saving." Dakota looked up at him curiously. "What kind of surprise?" "Our honeymoon. You know we're flying out tomorrow, but I haven't told you where we're going." "I assumed it was the Maldives," Dakota said, referring to the destination they had discussed. "That was a decoy," Ryan admitted with a mischievous smile. "We're actually going to Baja California." Dakota's eyes widened with delight. The gray whale migration, Ryan nodded. I know how much you've wanted to see it. I've arranged for us to join a marine research team for part of the time. We'll have privacy and luxury too, but I thought you might enjoy the scientific component. That's perfect, Dakota said, touched by how well he understood what would make the trip special for her. Absolutely perfect. As they rejoined their guests for the last dance of the evening, Dakota reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this point, from that chance rescue at a Manhattan restaurant to this moment of profound commitment. What had begun as an awkward date with someone else had led to the most meaningful relationship of her life, a partnership based on shared values, mutual respect, and a love that had only deepened with time. Later that night, as they lay together in the quiet of their home, now officially shared, Ryan traced patterns on Dakota's bare shoulder, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, curling closer to him. "How grateful I am that you had a terrible date that night," he said with a small smile, "and that I happened to be in exactly the right place at the right time." "Some might call that fate," Dakota suggested. "I might be inclined to agree." Ryan's arms tightened around her. "All I know is that from the moment I saw you, something in me recognized something in you. Like a part of me that had been missing suddenly found its way home." Dakota pressed a kiss to his chest, directly over his heart. "That's exactly how it felt for me too. Like finding a piece of myself I didn't know was missing." As they drifted toward sleep, wrapped in each other's arms as husband and wife, Dakota thought about the unpredictable nature of life, how a single moment, a chance encounter, could alter everything that followed. Her disastrous blind date had led to this profound connection, this partnership that now formed the foundation of her life. In the years that followed, their bond only strengthened as they built a life together that balanced individual passions with shared purpose. The Marine Conservation Division of the Westbrook Foundation became a leader in oceanic protection and rehabilitation efforts, with Dakota eventually taking a more public role as her scientific credentials continued to grow independently of her connection to Ryan. Ryan, true to his word, restructured his business commitments to allow for a more balanced life, delegating operational responsibilities while maintaining strategic oversight. Together, they traveled extensively, combining foundation work with personal adventures and scientific expeditions. 2 years after their wedding, they welcomed their first child, a daughter named Lily, who inherited her mother's curiosity and her father's determined spirit. A son, James, followed 3 years later, completing their family. Their lake house expanded to accommodate their growing family, but retained its essential character as a sanctuary from the public world they occasionally had to navigate. They raised their children with a deep appreciation for nature and a strong sense of responsibility toward environmental stewardship, values that both Ryan and Dakota held dear. On quiet evenings, when the children were asleep and they had the dock to themselves again, they would sometimes reminisce about their unlikely beginning, the billionaire and the marine biologist, whose paths crossed by chance, but whose lives became inextricably and joyfully intertwined. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if I hadn't been at that restaurant that night?" Ryan asked on their 5th anniversary as they sat watching the sunset in what had become their tradition. "Sometimes," Dakota admitted. "But then I think about how strongly I was drawn to you from the beginning. I believe we would have found each other somehow." Ryan smiled, pulling her close. "I think you're right. Some connections are simply meant to be." And as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the water, Dakota knew with absolute certainty that theirs was exactly that kind of connection, one that had been unexpected but inevitable, challenging at times but always worth every effort, and ultimately, the greatest blessing of her life. What had begun as a rescue from an awkward date had become a lifetime of love, partnership, and shared purpose. And neither of them would have had it any other way.